I'm Dr. Richard Brown. I'm an associate professor of clinical psychiatry at Columbia University in New York City. I use integrative psychiatry in my practice, and I also train other doctors who want to use the tools of integrative psychiatry to enhance how their patients feel. Diet is a crucial issue, and there has been a lot of research, particularly in the last 12 years, about the effect of diet on how we age, how it affects our memory. So it's very interesting because some of the things that I use in my practice have come from Russian research. And many years ago, it's over 20 years ago, the Soviet Union was trying to figure out why people who lived in the rural area of the Caucasus Mountains in the Republic of Georgia lived so much healthier into old age, and their brains worked so much better into old age. And they began to study them. And they identified 5 major factors. One of them was they noticed that the older people there ate about 500 less calories than people per day than other people in the rest of the former Soviet Union. They discovered that there were 5 major factors that correlated with people there living much longer and their brains working much better. Many more people there than most other places in the world live from 90 to 120, and their brains are working really well and they're pretty healthy, and they're respected and involved in major decisions in their villages. They're not pushed aside at all. And they often form traveling bands to go around to different towns and play beautiful music. Music is wonderful for your brain. And one of the first factors they found that distinguished the people there, the older people there, from people in the rest of the former Soviet Union was they ate about 500 less calories per day than people elsewhere. And a recent study, which I haven't read the full details of, is suggesting that people eating around 2,100 calories per day or more had much more problem with their memory when they were older. And that makes sense, because eating more, especially when you become less active when you get older, means that your blood sugar is higher. And there's a good bit of data that having a higher blood sugar when you're older means your brain cells don't work as well, and you're a little bit more likely to have mild cognitive impairment, and quite possibly, and there's very interesting ongoing research, especially in Quebec province in Canada, where they have a very much more aged population in that province than the other provinces or in most of America. And they have some data suggesting that a higher blood sugar means you are more likely to get Alzheimer's. It doesn't mean you are going to get Alzheimer's, it means it is more likely. Now, they also found in the Republic of Georgia that what people ate was different. And there's also been a good bit of data on that. And so research suggests eating a diet like a Mediterranean diet. The first researchers studied it on the island of Crete in the Mediterranean. But it's very similar to the Georgian diet. So people ate a lot of bright colored vegetables, green, yellow, orange, purple, and they had a lot of fresh fruits, not so much fruit juices, fresh fruits, which have many things together that enhance the effects of crucial vitamins. And their diet was slightly higher naturally, not through supplementation, in vitamin C and natural vitamin E. There are 8 kinds of vitamin E. It's not just one molecule. And they found they ate a lot more unsaturated fatty acids. They were not eating saturated fats in significant amounts. So fish, nuts and seeds, wheat germ oil, things like that are very important. And also, their diets were very high in natural antioxidants, which not only come from things like spinach, but from herbs like sage and rosemary and thyme and others. And really green salads, okay, things like that. Now, there's also interesting data, for example, that people in India are less likely to get Alzheimer's, are less likely to get certain kind of cancers, and they use a lot of turmeric which is what gives curry its yellow-orange color. And that has remarkable anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties in human and animal studies, for example. In also a series of studies in the last 12 years, there's more data that when people get older, not only should they have that kind of Mediterranean diet with unsaturated fatty acids and intake of vitamin C and E, but also good B vitamins. And supplementing in many cases with B vitamins is really important. So a little bit more folic acid, a little bit more B12, a little bit more B6 seems to correlate with reducing homocysteine, reducing inflammation in the brain. People's mood and memory is better, and they are less likely to get Alzheimer's. In several studies now, one group showed taking a little bit of SAMe, or acetylmethionine, a very low dose actually, with acetyl L-carnitine and N-acetylcysteine with B vitamins meant that people who had mild cognitive impairment when they were older had an improvement in their memory. If someone had early Alzheimer's, that combination of nutrients improved their memory. And if they had more severe Alzheimer's, it improved their memory, and it helped their prescription medicine for Alzheimer's. Aricept is the brand name, or donepezil is the generic name. It helped it work better for that person's memory. There's also a bunch of studies showing that a nutrient, it's a special fat called phosphatidylserine, is really good for memory in people over 40. People under 40 don't need it. Most people's memory under 40 is quite good, but over 40, it's not so good. We lose about 1 to 2% of our memory per year starting at age 20. And also, the phosphatidylserine enhances people's ability to be resilient with stress. And it goes into the nerve cell membrane and helps make the nerve cell membrane more fluid. So in the studies, what the best researcher, the most prolific researcher on this while he was at NIH showed, a psychologist named Ted Crook, was that on phosphatidylserine, your memory was like someone 10 years younger. Now, to young people, they say, big deal, 10 years younger. When you're over 40, being 10 years younger sounds good. It can be very challenging for consumers to get proper information. So our book, I feel, is a really important resource. One of the reasons we wrote it was not only to have scientific background for people's doctors. So if a patient goes to talk to their doctor, this doctor says, well, I don't know of any research on that. The patient can bring the book and show the person there's research. Well, a lot of doctors are shocked when they read a book how much research there is on these things. So the book, How to Use Herbs, Nutrients in Yoga and Mental Health Care, is good. We also wrote a lot about diet in our book called The Rhodiola Revolution. Rhodiola is spelled an interesting way. It's R-H-O-D-I-O-L-A. And it's an herb used in the Arctic regions of the world that the Soviets studied because they found the older people in their 90 to 120 age group in the Republic of Georgia were all taking rhodiola from the time they were young. And it was very high in polyphenolic compounds, which are wonderful antioxidants, and they make your brain work better, and they increase the energy of all cells in the body, so everything in the body works better, for example. As well as the fact that people were eating a lot of that stuff. And it's interesting, they eat a lot of bee products there, including bee pollen. Bee pollen is very high in polyphenols. In different parts of the world, people eat different things. Like in a very traditional area of southern Italy, where people were studied, it was very important to women in that area to put certain herbs that everybody grew at home into everybody's meals. And it turned out those herbs were extraordinarily high in polyphenols. And that correlated with people doing amazingly well in terms of their brain function when they got older. You know, it's very interesting that around the world, basil is very important in cooking. So in Italy, as well as India, different species of basil are very important. Also sage and rosemary. Now, one thing we've been lecturing and writing about recently is saffron. So most Americans either haven't heard of saffron much or they know that monks in Tibet take it. But actually, it was an ancient treatment that was first developed in Persia, at least 1,000 or more years ago. And it's a wonderful antioxidant. It pulls beta amyloid out of the brain that probably is a major factor predisposing to Alzheimer's. And it helps depression, and it helps premenstrual syndrome, and it's great for Alzheimer's. And it does a whole bunch of wonderful stuff. And there is modern research showing the benefits. And a group in Iran that we know who's been doing research on that and other natural treatments has done a lot of this research. But a group in France began to study it, and they found that it reduced people's craving for carbs. And a lot of people lost weight because they just weren't eating as much sugary stuff. And there is sugar in almost everything in our diet. It's put into it to make people want to eat more. And it also is very helpful for people who have wintertime depressions, who get kind of sluggish, not as productive during the winter, which in the upper Midwest and the Northeast is actually 1/3 or more of the population. One of the problems with using saffron as a spice is it is ungodly expensive. I'd say it's approaching the cost of gold per ounce. So what we recommend to our patients is getting a product that was introduced in the US by Life Extension Foundation. It's called optimized saffron. And it's very standardized. It's also enhanced with the component chemical that reduces the carbohydrate craving. Consumers often wonder if they're having trouble with their memory and they're over 55, does that mean they have Alzheimer's or they will get Alzheimer's? And in fact, most of the time, I'd say no. Our memory does not work as well when we get older. And in fact, as I was discussing with a patient in my office yesterday who was complaining of memory problems, when we get older, one of the first things we notice about our memory is it takes longer to remember something, first of all. So we call it delayed recall. You know, when you're younger, it's like, boom, what you need just comes into your mind. And when you get older, very commonly, it's like trying to remember a language you studied a long time ago. It's like the words just don't come easily, and they kind of come in a couple minutes later. The more anxious you get about it, it shuts it off. The second thing about our memory that's really important, and this is especially true of women in menopause, is when you're younger and you try to remember something, you can remember where you first learned that thing. And you remember who was there and what it smelled like and what it looked like. And when you get older, you don't remember any of that. And it's hard because even getting one cue from that situation can help your remembering. But that kind of memory really goes down once we're 50 or 55 or older. So a lot of my patients panic when they start having memory problems. And I have to tell them, listen, even when we do memory testing, you're not being compared to somebody who's 20 years old. You're being compared to people in the 50 to 60 age group or the 60 to 70 age group. And you have to understand it's a whole different yardstick. And what you've lost in terms of how quick your memory is, you get in terms of experience and wisdom, hopefully. Now, it's also interesting that there's a good bit of data on what's called working memory. So working memory is kind of like, if you think of your brain as being like a computer, working memory is what you have on your desktop. And being able to have a lot of stuff on your desktop correlates with being very skillful at a task mentally. Having different things that you can use creatively to solve a problem is really valuable. And one thing that's not well known is ginseng, like Chinese or Korean ginseng, and even American ginseng, helps working memory. It also helps reaction time, and it helps lower blood sugar, some, not a huge amount, so it won't make people too low in their blood sugar, but it slightly brings it down. But a big thing for me with my older patients is it can improve their mental alacrity, speed of answering or doing a task, but also they can keep more things in mind to deal with a problem. That's your working memory. So another factor that was found by the Soviets in the Republic of Georgia that accounted for the longevity of the people there was they drank a goat's milk kefir that had 16 special bacteria that are meant to live inside us. each one of those bacteria gives us a special advantage. For example, one of them, we knew by the year 2000, in the best scientific medical journal in the world, that bacteria signaled the immune system through your whole body to go out and kill cancer cells. Absolutely crucial for protecting us from cancer. Another probiotic bacteria called Lactobacillus rhamnosus, or L. rhamnosus, on the probiotic bottles that's found in the goat's milk kefir, in animal studies, makes the animal much more resistant to the effects of stress. Their brain works much better when they're under stress. They have much lower cortisol levels, which means that their brain is not being damaged by the stress and their blood sugar is staying lower. And also, it's fascinating that the bacteria must send some signal through the vagal nerve, which is the heart of the soothing, recharging part of our autonomic nervous system. And so there is a communication from the little bacteria in our gut to our brain to make us function better. Another of these bacteria makes our intestinal cells absorb more nutrients better than we would otherwise. So we were evolved to be in symbiosis with those bacteria. They were meant to help us, and we help them together. Another thing that I find is very valuable for my patients, which has 33 placebo-controlled randomized double-blind studies. That's the gold standard. And especially helpful in older patients is a traditional Swiss herbal tonic called Bio-Strath, Bio-Strath. It's a special form of brewer's yeast, and it's grown on beds of successive medicinal alpine herbs, which are high in the polyphenols that I talked about earlier as being very good for your body and your brain. And one thing they showed in older people is after 3 months on it, their brains worked much better, their bodies were much healthier, measured in functional assessments as to what people could do. Much better than placebo. Their brains and their bodies work better. It's also great for athletes compared to placebo. They did a huge study of like 5,000 kids. They found that the kids were much less likely in the winter in Switzerland to get sick and have to take off from school. And they did another study of like 5,000 business people, finding that they were much less likely to be absent from work or to get sick as well. And there are many other benefits to the Bio-Strath. And the doctors I teach, almost all of whom take it regularly and give it to their families, they'll say, "This is the most important thing you ever taught me."